In 2012, Will Toledo released the concept album Twin Fantasy under the musical project Car Seat Headrest. It chronicles a codependent relationship united and violently ripped apart by Will's idealized image of his partner. As reality sets in, the intoxicating high of fantasy fades away. Back in February, I watched Christopher Munch's The Hours and Times, and then the following day, I watched Wong Happy Together. I didn't realize that when I put on Happy Together the night after I watched The Hours and Times, I would find such a thematically linked double feature between these two. Very broadly, these two films explore yearning. As in, why does yearning happen? Why does the act of not having actively hurt so much more? More specifically, these films look at relationships which are flawed, toxic, codependent. And the people in these relationships are yearning for something from their partner, yearning for something that they know that they can't get, but they still want so dearly. Most of the time that I use the word you, well, you know that I'm mostly singing about you. Being a former Beatles fan, major former Beatles fan, Beatlemaniac if you will, I have always been sort of aware of this movie as one of the two gay Beatles fanfic movies. The other one being Two of Us, which I have not seen, but it looks pretty silly. And that's sort of what I imagined The Hours and Times to be, but gee golly, it was not that. The Hours and Times is a fictionalized account of what happened on a trip to Barcelona that John Lennon and Beatle manager Brian Epstein took in 1963, right before the explosion of Beatlemania. It's a quiet film about yearning. Rather than the Beatle, the film follows Brian and his emotional conquest for the man he fancies, John Lennon. It's structured like one of those things just happen type films, which I love. The relationship isn't just professional, it's personal, it's a friendship, except it's more than a friendship, but it's not romantic, but in a way it is, but it can, but they both want it, but not really, but maybe. And that's the problem. Brian is in love with John, and John knows that. He doesn't flat out reject him, he even flirts with him. He plays with Brian's feelings with an immense uncertainty about his own. In an early scene, the two discuss sex. Specifically, John brings up anal sex and how he'll never take it. But he still presses John for a discussion.
It puts me off to think about doing it, and her to think about having it done.
But you think about it, no less.
I do, but it bugs me a lot.
Then leads to even more seduction between the two.
I don't reckon I'd hurt anyone. I'm not so very large now.
No.
But large enough.
Of course.
You?
The same.
So after that, I watched Wong Happy Together. It's about a gay couple living in Argentina. Vi and Ho are not in a healthy relationship. In fact, when we first meet the two in the film, they're already on the precipice of the end of one of their relationships before they decide to start over. Something that they often do.
Are you fine? 不如我哋由頭再嚟過。
我就記得佢同我講，覺得同我喺埋一齊好悶，不如大家分開下。但有機會撞翻咪由頭嚟過咯。其實何寶榮嘅由頭嚟過係可以有兩個意思。
Are you fine?
In their happiest moments, their romance flourishes and their love for each other is warm and immense. And once that honeymooning feeling is over and reality sort of sets in, that's when they break again.
有樣嘢我一直都冇話俾何寶榮聽，其實我唔想佢咁快好返。佢受傷嗰排係我同佢最開心嘅日子。
In both of these films, the characters let expectations torture them. These are these expectations, these fantasies that want to be fulfilled but just can't. In the case of Brian and John, it's the constant will we, won't we, communicated either through layers of innuendo or very vulgarly and in your face. In the case of Fi and Ho, it's the urge to love someone and have the feeling that comes with loving someone, but also not having to deal with the baggage of having to know someone so intimately. These films look at yearning for what could be and yearning for what has been, both which are fundamentally destructive to the development of a relationship and which we will find out more about in this next part. And of course, fantasy has to end at some point. It just can't keep sustaining itself without destroying both sides in the process. And as this fantasy lives on, or at least tries to, the pressure builds and it builds and it builds and it builds and builds until it can't hold anymore, but instead of a big bang, it's released in a small pop. A small pop, and the residual pressure is released in a constant have a relationship burst up in flames in an instant is heartbreaking, but to have it eating away at you before and after the separation is devastating, I argue. After John goes with Brian to a gay bar to help him meet men, Brian is tired of John seeming to constantly toy with his emotions. Even when he offers a helping hand, the intoxicating idea of John fails to vacate his mind. He drunkenly confides with a hotel bellboy, telling him, "Thank God you're here, just needing to tell somebody about it." Especially since he could never talk so clearly about this stuff directly with John.
Do you know John's just had a baby? Well, John's wife, Cynthia. A baby? Understand? No? More worry in the world. Another poor bastard. Well, not quite a bastard, but I suppose the little beggar will love the bastard too. Do you know, sometimes I hate him so much I want to die. He's my only chance, you see.
So at this point, the peril of the fantasy is already working unwaveringly to build and build and build and build so much pressure, amounting in so much yearning and wishing for things that you just can't have, waiting for things that you know will never come, waiting for that fulfillment of fantasy. And when that pressure builds up and it gets close, the gaskets slip.
I've been waiting for you to scrub me back.
So now Brian is left wondering what it all was, what he was. It was a fleeting moment for sure, and it probably seemed much more meaningful in the way that he imagined it would happen. But now, he could have been helpful for John, helping him discover himself, maybe. Maybe if that was a part of himself that he even wanted to discover in the first place.
You all right, John?
But for sure, what he would never be to John is the one. In Happy Together, the weak spots in Fi and Ho's relationship start to crack. Fi grows weary as Ho starts to gain more independence after he recovers from his injury.
去邊嚟啊？
買煙咯，
買煙着得咁靚嘅，
你成日都冇街去，咪著靚衫行街咯。
He didn't want things to change from the way that he saw when they were happiest. In the following scene, he buys a massive retail box of Le Mans cigarettes to make sure that Ho doesn't have a reason to leave the nest.
咁多煙做咩啫？
行開咪買咯，費事你一個人夜媽媽同落街買煙。
The unstable foundation that this relationship was resting on starts to crumble rapidly. Then after Fi takes Ho's passport, their fantasy goes pop. There's so many ways to depict so many different types of toxic relationships, but I found these two to be so incredibly captivating. Maybe because they relate to themes that I have related to when I listen to Twin Fantasy going through my own self-destructive fantasies. It was just such a specific gay yearning that these three pieces of media managed to perfectly articulate to stab me in the heart again.
Pretty soon you'll find some nice young Satanist with braces and one capital O significant other, and you can take him home to your mother and say, Mom, this is my brother. We better